And I think we're live. I'm not sure if we're going to have an audience, but if you happen to be watching, this is an experiment. Denise Pink and I, often find ourselves having these conversations in a Zoom room without us knowing where it's going to go. We just start a conversation, and it always has this interesting twist, or we end up asking each other really interesting questions. So I came up with the idea of wanting to record this and going live on my business page, and to see where it takes us. The point is, the whole idea behind this is to let it be easy. We don't have an agenda. We don't have a subject we want to talk about necessarily. We're just coming to this space together, prepared to see where it takes us. So, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know what we're going to talk about. So if you'd like to join us in the experiment, please do. You can find this recorded episode or conversation on Denise Pink's page or on LinkedIn, should you find it interesting and you want to watch it there. So, hello, Denise.
Hello, Diane. Hi. Gosh, that was an interesting introduction.
I mean, let it be easy, right? My legs are right here.
Yeah, relax.
Yeah, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. We've just got off a call. We went live in Anka's group and we spoke about a retreat. But how this is going to evolve, I have no idea.
Neither do I. But this morning I was thinking about let it be easy, and about things being easy. And you speak, how many languages do you speak fluently?
4.
4 languages fluently. So that's a lot more than I do. But so at the end of the 1980s, I was fluent in German, right? And so I haven't really spoken German properly for like a long time. That's a long time, like 30 years or something. And last year I was on holiday in Germany, and what I noticed was I was with one of my daughters, and we got talking to this German lady at a tram stop because we were trying to get somewhere. We didn't know where we were going really. And you know what I noticed was, when I didn't really think about it, the sentences in German came out of my mouth that I didn't know that I knew. You know, if somebody said to me, how do you say that in German? I'd be like, I've got no idea. But I was just in this conversation with this German woman, and these words and sentences were just coming out of my mouth with ease, with no thought about them, not me trying to translate or anything like that. And you know, I found it really interesting because I thought, you know, I was thinking, well, is that memory? Am I somehow recalling that? But you know what occurs to me now, and this might be a bit nutty, right? But I think it's just that in the moment of like no pressure, it's just like the words they just flow. So I don't know if you, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy because now I'm started reading some books in German, Harry Potter in German, and just because for the fun of it, right? And I find sometimes, and this is weird, is that I'm walking around the house and, you know, like everyone else, I think pretty much all the time. And sentences occur in my mind in German, like randomly, or I'll be thinking something and this one word in the sentence, you know, in the thing will just be a German word.
Yeah.
And I think, that's really, really interesting. And that, it's just like there's this kind of flow of stuff. And so I'm intrigued as to whether, because you speak these 4 languages, is it easy? Well, I mean, what's your take on that? Is it easy for you? Do you dream in a particular language, or what happens with that?
Well, something struck me in what you said. So I'd like to refer back to that and then I answer your question. I think what I heard you say is this. I think there are two forces in the sense that we have a brain and we're co-creating and we're allowing whatever to flow through us. And in that moment, you weren't bothered about whether you'd be able to say the sentence or not to that lady.
Yeah.
So it just flowed through you. But you did refer to your back burner, because we do have a back burner. We do have a storage for language. The thing is, when we don't use it, it just gets put somewhere in our brain. But what's interesting to me is, was it easy or not? And that's what you asked me, is this. My first language is English, and I think I dream in English, but I know I have dreamt in German because I've woken up, and I woke up, when I woke up, I realized I was speaking to someone in German and Dutch. And, but when I'm frazzled, or when I'm, 2 weeks ago, I was invited to pizza to a Dutch friend of mine who's married to an Italian. And they had Italian guests over, and he makes this delicious pizza. And I love speaking Italian. But because I was concerned that I couldn't speak the language, I was stammering. The minute I stopped thinking about whether I could or not, the words just flowed.
Yeah.
And what happens to me is, because I'm now, English is my first language, and I am fluent, the most common, well, how do you say that? My best language is English. Okay. I think I would put Maltese at the last. Now that is my mother language, you know. I hated it. I hated the language. There's racism laced in that, which I don't like to say openly. It's gone now. I'm proud of the language, but that's why I hated it, because it reminded me of Arabs and the connotations I had. So it was on my last run. But coming back to your question, it happens to me even when I'm speaking in English. If I'm worried that I can't find a word, I won't find it. It just won't flow. But when I slow down and allow myself to go at a pace that is natural for me, because I'm a slow speaker, I can't speak fast. When I allow myself to go at my own rhythm, the words just come. When I try to speed myself up, the words don't. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Oh, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because that is interesting. Yeah, it's that thing, especially for me, like with the German, it is, if I get it, will I get it right or not? You know, or will I mess up the endings? It's got so many different endings, haven't they?
Yeah.
Which in English, I mean, we don't have. We have other weird stuff going on. I nearly said shit then. Are we swearing?
Of course we're allowed. I don't censor anything. Well, I mean, I'm just wondering if anyone's joined us. I just have a look, but you can use any words you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you going to say?
So I'm intrigued now. When you go, if you speak to your mum, do you speak to her in Maltese or English? Maltese? No.
When I speak to my mom, I speak to her in English.
Oh, okay.
But what's uncanny, or what's really clever about us Maltese, is we can speak, in one sentence, there can be Maltese and English. And when I'm speaking to my sister and my family, I can have Maltese, English, and Dutch.
Wow.
Because now I have the languages muddled in my head. So because I'm lazy, I tend to find the first word that comes to my mind and I use it. But then my sister says to me sometimes, hello, I can't understand. You just spoke to me in Dutch. So I do it unconsciously too. But my grandmother didn't go to school because she had to take care of her 10 brothers and sisters. but she could read and write. And I think she spoke to me largely in Maltese. But my mother spoke to me in English. And I was brought up in a Catholic, very elitist, by very elitist nuns who forbade us from speaking Maltese. So it became my natural go-to. And I'm glad I do, because English is widely spoken. I mean, I can't imagine living in a world where I couldn't speak English.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yes. The only thing is, though, I think I mean, I have literally been on holiday, like when I was younger, with people like probably not my mum and dad, but the older generation, or not with those people, but I've seen British people who can't speak a foreign language and they're in France or Germany or Italy or somewhere. They literally just speak more slowly and louder in English, thinking that somehow that will make a difference. And I think there's an arrogance about the British people who assume that everyone else should speak English. I think there's something a bit off about that. Just personally,
I tend to think that the French are quite
French,
because they assume that we have to speak in French. We have to speak French, and well, I can understand it. It was a language that I learned at school. I loved languages, but I was never fluent. But language was my forte. But in France, when I went to Paris, I found it difficult to communicate, and they refused to go down to my level, so to speak, when I was asking for information for the tube or for directions. I mean, what do you think? Did I come to your country and I can't speak your language? It's not a given. It's not an internationally used language.
I suppose it isn't really, is it? No, the French are a bit like that.
That's our very biased opinion.
Yes,
I mean, there might be
really.
Yes, disclaimer. I do happen to think that French is one of the most beautiful languages in the world.
Yeah. Well, I really like all sorts of languages. One of the things for me about going to a different country is when people don't speak English. I actually really like it, unless I need to really communicate. Well, but you see, the thing is, you can communicate, can't you? Because when I moved to Switzerland in like the mid-1980s, I didn't speak any German at all. We were living in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. We moved to the German-speaking part, but I didn't speak any German. And I remember moving into an apartment and having to get a telephone installed. And I had to go to at the time it was a shop, went to this shop, and the people in the shop didn't speak any English and I didn't speak any German. So we had to work out, what kind of, we needed a phone, what kind of phone did we need, when could they install it, and all this other stuff. But, we just...
We worked it out. You worked it out.
Work it out, don't you? You point at clocks, you write things down, you get the calendar out, whatever it's kind of interesting.
Nonverbals are international. I mean, I've noticed in the taxi, when someone's really unhappy with me, they don't have to say a damned word. It's written all over their faces.
Yeah.
Or when I'm unhappy with them. I think 70% of our communication is nonverbals. Yeah, I'm not sure of the percentages, but it's very high. So I think if we really wanted to communicate with someone, we'd find a way, irrespective of whether we understand each other or not. Having said that, when I came here to the Netherlands, and was 12 years ago almost now, my ex-partner, majored in English and sociology. So it wasn't extremely difficult for her to have a conversation with me. However, the English language, for her, expressing herself emotionally, it was difficult. Because I think language has a culture tied to it. It's not just the language. It's the Dutch language has so much culture embedded into it. And that's the beauty to me of language. The words they use, for example, if they say happy birthday, they don't say happy birthday, Denise, or happy birthday. They do say happy, but they say gefeliciteerd, which means congratulations. But if I were to invite you to my party and it's my daughter's birthday and you were Dutch, you would say gefeliciteerd met die verjaardag van je dochter. So they would say congratulations with the birthday of your daughter. They would also congratulate you. And that to me says so much about their culture.
Yeah, well, that is interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
Oh yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I think that whole, yeah, that is so interesting. Well, it's funny because I just, for the fun of it, I thought I would try and translate that little book that I just wrote, right? My little book. I thought I'd try and translate it into German just for the fun of it. Not because I'm not going to publish a German edition, but then I was trying, and I started, and obviously my German's really rusty, you know, but I found that you just don't say things the same way in another language. It just, this translating thing, I can't just take word for word and just swap in the word in German, because it doesn't make any sense at all. And there's also a different feel to it. And some of it where I would read the sentence, right, and then I would just think, well, and then I would just sit back and think, well, what would I say in German that would be something like that?
Yes.
And so that for me that's been really quite good fun. I mean, I'm not sure whether any of it's right or not, you know, but it's just fun. But the way that people express things is different. And I realize that it's much more difficult for me to express emotion really in German, because it's not
your language. It's not your natural language.
No, it's not.
I can't even say that Dutch is my natural language. English is really my natural language. I have an affinity. I don't even know how to describe it. I love it because I love languages, but I find that words and letters have energy of their own, right? So energetically, they vibrate on different, letters vibrate as well, and energetically words vibrate. So I'm imagining the translation of one English sentence and the emotion that there is behind that sentence. If you translate it to another language, to captivate the same vibration and emotional charge it has would be different.
Yeah.
I bought a course once of a woman who uses the writing of the alphabet and writing the E's and the O's differently to change perception, to change your beliefs. I got into it, but my handwriting changed slightly. It's a whole study.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and every single letter vibrates, and so, and some words express what an emotion or a feeling in different languages. So I find myself switching languages if I want to express an emotion.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it?
So tell me about your book. I mean, I've been wanting to ask, and I'm going to ask publicly. I want to buy it, but I want it signed.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, that's cool. I can make that happen.
Yeah, because you talked about your book, and it would be nice to hear you talk about it and why you were inspired to write it. I always forget the title. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so do I, which is kind of weird, isn't it? I have to make sure I get it right. Okay, so it's called, it's called Through My Eyes, and then it has a subtitle, which is like...
That's the subtitle I'm interested in.
Yeah, a glimpse beneath the surface of an ordinary life. That's the subtitle. I don't, you know, well, I joined, it was, when it was, must have been in beginning of April or something. I joined, somebody invited me to a Facebook group,
Jenny
which was
Schmall.
about,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it was Jenny, but it could have been Jenny. Could have been Jenny. And I've always thought I'd write a book, but you know, I always thought I'd write something really profound. I thought I'd write something really profound and impactful, and it would be like, yeah, one of these, like, I don't like the word self-development, but one of these those kinds of books about life and all that kind of thing. And so I thought, oh, I'll join this. I joined it, and I thought, oh, that's okay. I'll just have a go, see what happens. And you know, at the end of the the idea was that you write the book and publish it within 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Obviously on Amazon, Kindle, you know, whatever. Self-publish. And so I sat down to start writing. And I just nothing really came out that was
really,
yeah, not in the way that I thought it would. And I started writing all these things, and I thought, oh, it's just so well shit, to be honest. And I thought, oh no, can't write that. And so, but what's really interesting about this little book is it is just these stories of some experiences that I've had, which I think give a glimpse beneath the surface of life, right? Well, what was interesting about them was, as I started writing them, I actually found them really, really quite hard, emotional to write. If you read the book, you might not think that, because the stories are very bare. And, you know, I haven't got any flowery, you know, and the full moonlight shone down on the blah, blah, blah. There's none of the glittering surfaces and all. There's none of all of that. They're really just the bare bones of stories, which is why I kind of thought that's weird that I thought nobody would want to read it, which is fine with me. But they were really, really hard. They were really quite, not hard to write, they were really emotional to write.
Because it was they're on a personal stories?
There's one about my dad, and at first I wasn't going to put it in there because it's all really about, oh, even I don't even want to say it out loud. It's all about this thing of like, what we see isn't, there's so much more going on. And there's so much more, these stories are about things that just, where life really just lines up. It really lines up. And I think for me to put down on paper, to actually write something down on paper and publish something which I suppose I feel is really it's the truth of how I see things. But I guess I don't think it's a mainstream way of looking at things. I think it's a bit woo-woo, a bit out there.
What do you mean it's the truth? What do you mean?
Well,
our perception. You said something that reminded me of how we first started this conversation. When suddenly you met that lady, and suddenly the words flowed out of you, and it seems to. And this book was written not in a way that you had expected it to. And then you referred to reality is not as we see it. And now you're talking about it being woo.
Yeah. Confused? You will be. Yeah. What's the question?
Yeah, true. Why is it woo?
Well, that's probably the emotional part of me actually writing it, is this idea that it's woo-woo. You know what woo-woo means? Everyone knows.
Yes, I do. And I think talking about stuff that we can't see it can come across as woo-woo.
Can come across woo-woo. And I think probably in the past I've had that. I have never really said in this kind of definitive, written black and white on a page, this is how I see it. Life.
But what do you mean, this is how I see it? How do you see it? I think that was the question I wanted to ask
Oh,
before.
okay. Gosh, it's difficult to that's why the stories are useful.
Is there a little story you can read to us, perhaps? I don't know.
I can read you a story if you like.
And then I can get an idea of how this is how I see it.
Yeah. I know.
Although I want a signed book from you, but I have to send it mine.
Right. Well, I don't know. But this one just comes to mind, so I just read this one then. So, okay. So it's called A Bed for the Night. It's weird reading actually your own stuff. I've never read this out loud, really, I don't think. Anyway, so in the 1980s, I was on a road trip with a friend. We were traveling from Basel to Vienna, taking our time, stopping anywhere we fancied along the way. It was so much fun to just follow our noses and see where we ended up. Of course, there was no mobile phone and no internet, but each evening we would easily find somewhere to stay. And then we arrived at Mondsee. There was some kind of event taking place and it was crowded. It seemed unlikely that we would find a parking space, never mind a bed for the night. But it was such a pretty place and it was already early evening, a bit too late to drive any further. So we decided to look for a place to park. Eventually, we pulled into a dusty car park and grabbed the last space. We were hungry, but we would have to look for somewhere to sleep first. As we got out of the car, an elderly woman approached us. "Are you looking for a place to sleep tonight?" she asked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've got goosebumps just reading that. All at once, without even trying, we had a bed for the night.
Wow.
We slept in her spare room and enjoyed our breakfast on the balcony the next morning. It was like she was waiting for us there in the car park, holding that last space for us. It was as if her room had our name on it, and she was the concierge greeting us as we arrived. Who or what could organize the perfection of that, other than life itself?
So that's the glimpse beneath the surface. There's nothing woo-woo about that to me. And as a young woman in my teens or even before that, I came from a place that followed a whisper. I didn't think or try to logically find out a solution, or I was very analytical, and I was a troubled teenager because I was a lesbian grappling with my sexuality, but I pretty much followed my gut until I had to start earning money and I was out there on my own. Then I started to use this vessel. But now, for some reason, I'm going back to my source, to what I trusted before. But it's really has taken me time to walk back, to come back. Well, I never left it. I only thought I left it. I never did, because you can't leave source. It doesn't leave you. We only think it does. And it's only now I'm thinking to myself, all I have to do is listen. And when I'm not listening, it means I'm using my intellect, and my answers aren't in my intellect. And I think this is how you see it, but I'm using different words. I used to do that with parking spaces. I used to be with my friends and I used to tell them, right, we're going to find a parking space. You just watch. And they used to look at me and say, no, it's impossible. It's all packed. And we just used to find a parking space.
I think that was one of the most fun things. I did a number of trips when I lived in Switzerland. It's one of I drove around a lot. I mean, went to visit a lot of different places because I knew I wouldn't live there forever. And I just want to make the most of it. But, you know, like in the 1980s, so I'm talking like moved out there in 1985 and I came back in 1989. So that's like the 80s. There was no, you had telephone directories. You know, you couldn't you're not like now where you go on the internet and you look up a hotel, you look for a hotel and you think, oh, I'll book that and then I'll be there tomorrow, and you know, oh, I'll book that for tonight or whatever. You didn't, that wasn't a thing. We didn't even have mobile phones. And sounds like the dark ages, doesn't it? But but I used to love it. We used to go on these trips, and my mum and dad came out to stay with me once in Switzerland. Well, they came out more than once, but on this particular time, we went on this little sort of like, I think it was 3 or 4 night trip around the Alsace region, which is absolutely magnificent. It's a wonderful place, but we literally would just drive. And I think my dad found it really stressful, actually. He was a bit of he liked to have everything planned, but I loved it. The spontaneity of it, the what's going to happen, who knows, you know. And in one evening it got dark and we hadn't found anywhere to stay. And eventually I saw this sign for like an auberge or whatever just off the road. So we drive down this great big long drive, you know, and get to this little auberge place at the bottom. And you know, and it's kind of dark, and we go in, and in my perfectly imperfect schoolgirl French, I ask, you know, have you got a couple of rooms, you've got 2 rooms, etc. But I mean, the fun of that, the exhilaration of that, the exhilaration of it's the exhilaration of the surprise, it's the unknown, isn't it? It's the delight of something, you don't know how it's going to be. You just don't know where you're going to end up sleeping that night. You know you're going to.
Yes.
If it's in your car, you know
exactly.
you're going to. But it's the wonderful way that stuff comes together. That's the buzz.
That's what fascinates you.
That's what I love. It's what I love, but I don't. And I've noticed that I just haven't been living that way, and I want to do it more. I like the spontaneity of things. I mean, I just used to love that. Go on a trip and you don't know where you're going to stay. Okay, you've got an end point. You've got a beginning and an end, and who knows what's going to happen in between.
This conversation is very much based on that premise. Let's have a spontaneous conversation. Let's see where it takes us. We started with language. We ended up with your book, and we're talking about your adventures as a young girl. And I think, and pretty much we're living in an era where people want to have controlled outcomes. They want to know where they're going to win. They want assurance, is that a word? Of the outcome that they're expecting. And it just doesn't work that way. It really doesn't.
It's not fun either, is it? You know, I think that's one of the things that, well, that's just me. Obviously, I'm speaking for me personally. I want more fun. You know, I want there to be more fun. And if you always know how things are going to, well, the thing is, we think we know how things are going to work out, don't we? We think we know. Right. So a few weeks ago, I was sitting in this room and I was looking out, I was facing the window. And I don't know if I've told you this before, but I saw this little bit of smoke over the other side. It's a housing estate, so there's houses over the other side. And there was this just little puff of smoke, and I thought, oh, that's weird. And then because I thought, the corner of my eye, I saw this bigger thing of smoke, and I thought, oh, that's odd. What can anybody be burning over there? That's very strange. And then I saw flames, right? A few flames across the road, and the guy, the guy over the road he's got one of those things for getting rid of weeds. You sort of set fire to the weed, you know, and it just burns the weed away, sort of thing. But he'd obviously got too close to his hedge, and his hedge was on. It's okay. I'm smiling because like nothing bad happened in the sense that nobody got hurt or, you know, it all. But so we went out and helped try and sort the hedge out till the fire brigade arrived. But the thing is, if anybody had asked me that morning, you know, what do you think's going to happen? I would never have come up with that. I would never have said the guy over the road, their hedge is going to catch fire. It wouldn't be something I'd have said. I'm not saying that's some sort of wanted outcome, but what I'm saying is we just don't know, do we? Even a minute before I saw it, I didn't know.
You're equating that to what our life and how we don't know what's around the corner, right? And I think this is why people want to have a controlled outcome. They want to know what's around the corner. They want to know that whichever corner they turn, they're going to be safe. And that's no guarantee.
It's no guarantee, and as you're saying it, I realize that that's, you know, that's how I've been living for a few years, in this wanting to be safe kind of thing. But there's like there's a suffocation in that.
Yes.
There's a limitation in it, a huge limitation. There's a how small, how, if you're going to control everything, you're going to have to make everything so small that you feel like you can control it. And even then you can't, but you know, to get that feeling of it.
I think it's really an illusion. Nobody can control us. We can't control anything. Hmm. Hmm. Let it be easy.
Yeah,
It feels like we've come to an end.
I agree. Yeah.
Great. So I'm just going to stop the stream. We will be having more of these conversations. If you do happen to watch and you have any feedback or any, I don't know, tips, just let us know. We're open. Bearing in mind that we will always approach this conversation in a let it be easy form. Thanks for watching.